Welcome back. You are tuned into Salam Media. You are tuned into the special focus. My name is Zahid Jadwat, and we are together right up until 9 p.m. In fact, this evening, we are going to be discussing the latest developments and events that have occurred in the United States. With just a week left until President elect Joe Biden takes over the reins from outgoing President Donald Trump, several members of Donald Trump's Republican Party say they will vote to impeach the president over his role in last week's storming of Congress before his term in office officially ends. This comes after Trump supporters breached security at the Capitol Hill in Washington just a week ago. And tonight we are joined by Veta Geneva, who is an Amazon best-selling author, a political commentator, and security expert. She joins us now to unpack this further. Good evening, Veta, and welcome to the show.
Good evening, Zahid. Thanks for having me. Thanks so much. What we saw was really unprecedented, so let's get into it.
All right, and we also have Francis Koenige, who is a senior research fellow at the Institute for Global Dialogue, and he's also joining us now to explain to us why a smooth transition of power is important for American democracy and the rest of the globe at large. Good evening, Francis, and welcome to the show.
Good evening to you.
All right, so we're going to begin with this discussion now by taking a look at the events which have occurred over the last week or so. So last week, Wednesday, the Capitol Hill was, the security there was breached, and members of supporters of outgoing President Donald Trump breached security there, and in protest at that stage, they were protesting the legitimacy of President-elect Joe Biden's administration, which is to be inaugurated next week as well, in about a week or so. So what do you make of the events that are unfolding as America transitions from the Trump to Biden administration? Francis?
Okay, well, at the moment, you have a debate over impeachment that is actually underway in the House at this moment. And it will culminate in what is expected to be the second impeachment of President Trump. And this time it is expected that there will be a number of Republicans that will sign on to the impeachment. The first impeachment was purely along partisan lines. This time, however, there are important members of the House and the Senate who support impeachment, which I think is indicative of how serious Trump's behavior has come to be viewed by members of his own party. The Republicans are very much on the defensive and very much divided as a result of his having orchestrated and instigated the mob attack on the Capitol last week. So this is what is unfolding right now. After the impeachment vote, it will likely go to the Senate, and then we will see where it goes from there. It turns out that that the Senate outgoing majority leader, Mitch McConnell, is very much unhappy about Trump and is reportedly supportive of impeachment. And so this is where we are now. I mean, what you virtually have is a civil war within the Republican Party at a time when President-elect Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris are coming in and will need all the momentum that they can generate in coming up with a program to combat the the coronavirus and generate economic recovery.
Yeah, so you did mention, and you did mention about certain members of Donald Trump's own party now wanting to vote in favor of impeachment. In fact, it has been reported by the BBC, for example, that several Republican members have indicated that they will vote in favor of impeachment. Uh, so, what could be the reason? What's driving these members of his own party to actually vote for his impeachment, Francis?
Well, the thing is that throughout uh, the years of the Trump administration, there has been uh, reports of you know of ample underground unpublicized uh, dissatisfaction uh, that a number of Republicans in the House and Senate have had with Trump. Uh, but I mean, they have tended to keep themselves under wraps. They have not spoken out, and given his the loyalty of his base, which has become very fanatical. They have basically been intimidated into not expressing themselves. But what is happening now is that things have gotten to the point where the actual survival of the Republican Party as a viable opposition governing party is at stake. And they lost the election, uh, the presidential election. They've just suffered a double defeat in the Georgia runoff election, which means that the control of the Senate now goes to the Democrats. Uh, so I mean, what you have is something of a perfect storm that has converged. I mean, you have these defeats. You have uh, the president and his allies inciting an insurrection, and it's become a break point. And so it has forced a number of Republicans who have so far been silent to come out. There are other pressures that are exerting. Corporate donors are pulling their money. Uh, uh, the so I mean, that's become a major factor. In fact, Republicans who supported the objection to Biden being certified, the election being certified, they're now being targeted by donors who are going to refuse and stop campaign funding. So the Republican Party is now in turmoil. So so this is why a number of Republicans now whether we don't know how many are going to break for impeachment, but things have gotten to a break point.
Mhm. So clearly, there is some sort of dissatisfaction underlying within the Republican Party, which is now coming to the fore as a result. Being silent all this while and now coming to the fore is what we seem to be witnessing as it unfolds. But over to you now, Evita. What is the violence that has occurred in the United States during this transition period? In fact, if I may just speak about last Wednesday when pro-Trump supporters stormed Capitol Hill. That protest led to 5 people losing their lives that day. So, what does this violence tell us about the current political atmosphere within the United States at this moment?
I think first we should start with the fact that the US authorities were either completely unprepared or there were certain blocks that were really in the way of US law enforcement and the National Guard actually stepping in and preventing all this, I would say, preventable violence and preventable loss of life. Um, as we were watching these scenes, there were many calls from the both governors of Maryland and Virginia to actually send in the National Guard and DOD, the Department of Defense, and the current acting Secretary of Defense, who's really a Trump guy, were saying no repeatedly. So for me, that's also a very big concern because if these were Black Lives Matter protests, as we saw last spring, the situation would have been absolutely different. And so for me, that really signifies and just illustrates one more time that the FBI and the other law enforcement and security agencies, they have a misplaced terrorism obsession with the progressive left. But when it comes to actual white far right Trump supporters placing bombs at the Democratic and Republican conventions, then FBI is completely unprepared. And if I may also quote something else that I was listening to yesterday, namely the late, very late briefing by the FBI and DOJ, the Department of Defense, of the current situation and where the investigation actually stands, we we heard something very, very disconcerting, which was the standard that FBI actually uses, aspirational versus intentional actions. And so we also heard the words keyboard bravado. And for me, keyboard bravado is a little bit like the new locker room talk. So when it's Black Lives Matter, when we have a kid with a hoodie, that definitely right away is something suspicious. But when far right white Trump supporters are talking about placing bombs and executing kidnapping, blowing up, insurrection, that could also be keyboard bravado sometimes. So the FBI seems to be very, very sensitive when it comes to these situations because, it would be very rude to step in. But when it's something like social justice protests, like the Black Lives Matter, that's addressed immediately. And we also saw the difference between how it looks like when Black Lives Matter supporters and protesters are going to show up and then how completely unprepared or unwilling the authorities are when it's the other side.
28 minutes past 8 p.m. Central African Time. You are tuned into Salam Media. This is the special focus, and I'm Zahid Jadwat, your host until 8 p.m. this evening. We are discussing the latest developments in the United States of America, a country and a democracy which is currently in the stages of transition from one presidency to the next, and it's really interesting to see what's happening over on that side of the world. Unfortunately, quite a bit of violence. But something which I read one of our guests has highlighted earlier on. So there's a discussion about the FBI's treatment of Black Lives Matter protesters versus the treatment of Trump supporters last week. And there's quite a difference, as it would appear, between the treatment between the two different groups of protesters. I mean, why do you think there's this difference of treatment?
I think, as I already said, there's something that I like usually calling the misplaced terrorism obsession of the FBI with the progressive left in the US. And also, I believe there's certainly institutionalized racism. If we also look at very recently, I saw that a movie came out on Martin Luther King's basically interaction with the FBI. When it's a black person or a black leader, the FBI is safe to say we're not interested in addressing what actually happened to him, but rather trying to dig out dirt in Martin Luther King past. That's what the movie says, basically trying to discredit him, trying to weaken him. And so there's always been this kind of unbalanced treatment in my view. And if I can also share something from my personal experience, last year I ran for a UN Special Rapporteur on freedom of speech, and I was at the final. And so, as a Black Lives Matter protest supporters, somebody that was going to go after Trump and U.S. authorities for their treatment of the media and the Black Lives Matter protesters. I was stopped by Trump's own people in the UN system, including UNICEF's former Secretary of State Henrietta Ford, who's now the chief of UNICEF, who's a Trump political appointee. And so for me, it was also very clear at this very high level at the United Nations, when you're one of the top experts in the world trying to defend freedom of speech, there is always a Trump protester. So if it's not the FBI, it's certainly going to be someone like Henrietta Ford, who's a Trump political appointee. It's not only on the street, we don't see this difference also just in the media, but it's also at the highest levels at the United Nations.
Mhm. But before we move on, just to get a better understanding for myself and for the audience as well, what is feeding this misplaced terrorism obsession that you describe?
I think it goes back to the fact that if we take a look at what the left and the progressives have always been doing, they've been fighting for equality. And so if we take a look at the FBI as this sort of white man in the shades, classical, but could also be very true notion of what the FBI and the CIA actually are about. I can see definitely some sort of historical explanation about this. Basically, anybody on the left who's trying to shake the status quo. If I may quote also something, a controversial quote, Hoover, who's leading one of these agencies, said that Martin Luther King was one of the most dangerous Negroes in America. And so this is really the way that FBI and CIA probably haven't even changed today. It could be on the surface that, of course, all of us are talking about politically correct language, but let's look at the actions. Let's look at the actions when somebody like me, who's a very, very staunch supporter of the Black Lives Matter movement, is trying to move in these UN top criticizing, pointing the finger positions, there's also someone always stepping in and saying, no, no, that's okay. Trump and his people will take care of it. And this is why I launched a lawsuit at the United Nations Tribunal today for $1 against the Trump circle at the UN in order to address exactly this imbalance.
Yeah, and I think the events of last Wednesday really did shock many viewers across the world as they were unprecedented. It's something you wouldn't expect from such a, what many would have previously thought to be a strong democracy. Does this perhaps mean that America's democracy is under threat in some way or the other, Francis?
Yeah, let me just come in a bit in terms of the security situation. Actually, there is some conflict. There has been some contradiction within the intelligence community about the threat assessment, and to some extent, the Trump administration has suppressed a major uh, aspect of the intelligence that has come out of for example, the National Intelligence Council, which has identified uh, white supremacist right wing terrorism as the number one threat. Now, for political reasons, they have not been able uh, to formalize an official confirmation of that threat assessment, but it has become recognized that white supremacy is a global threat. Now, what's likely to happen, uh, given the events of last week, once the Biden administration comes in, and given the magnitude of the threat um, assessment, it will be interesting to see the uh, if what is has been called the COINTELPRO counterintelligence program will have a role in dismantling the far right uh, uh, pro Trump uh, uh, extremist movement. So there is a recognition that this is the primary threat. Now it remains to be seen to what extent that this is going to be followed up on. Um, but I mean, this in fact is a major part of the threat to that we're looking at in terms of the democratic uh, the democratic security of the country at this point. And this is something that is going to have to play out. I mean, basically, what you're looking at is a civil war situation that has emerged and that has, uh, peaked with this transition that is underway.
Yeah, and speaking about threat to security, whether it comes from left-wing organizations or right-wing organizations, it's something that's prevalent pretty much across the globe, across the globe at the moment. And at this moment, this today, in fact, as the impeachment is being debated at the moment as we speak, Nancy Pelosi has said that Trump is a clear and present danger to the nation. And basically, he's a threat to national security. Do you agree with this statement, Francis?
Well, yeah. I mean, the thing is that it's actually been quite obvious, uh, almost virtually from the time uh, Trump began his presidency, that that uh, that he is a threat. He has been a threat. It's not given the magnitude of the outrages almost on a daily basis. He is a threat, and uh, and not only that, I mean, he's not the only threat. I mean, you have right at this moment, and this is one of the interesting things about the focus that we have on the impeachment right now. While this is going on, you have the outgoing Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, uh, you know, establishing all kinds of diplomatic landmines for the incoming Biden administration, deciding, for example, to that the U.S. should recognize Morocco's sovereignty over the Western Sahara. Uh, just recently deciding to put the Houthi rebels on the terror list, which is going to result in a major humanitarian disruption in with regard to Yemen, and then a vindictively malicious uh, uh, a re-listing of Cuba uh, 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 as a state supporter of terrorism. So you see, you have all kinds of mischief that is being planted as uh, as Trump's administration ends and Biden comes in. Now, a lot of this is not getting much coverage, as we're now, focused quite rightly on the crisis of security as a result of the mob, the right wing uh, fascist mob attack last week.
Yeah, so Avita, over to you now. As a political commentator, what do you think this sort of instability that is currently occurring in the United States? What sort of effect do you think this is going to have on the country? So, some analysts suggesting civil unrest may be possible in time to come, because the fact is that there is this sort of tug of war between far right and far left, and it's going to remain there. And at some point, it's got to boil over, I think. What are your thoughts on this?
Exactly. Just let me insert a little comment, just a little bit again on the terrorism. So yes,
Mm,
the National Security Council has defined domestic right-wing terrorism as a very big threat, if not the biggest threat. And we have to say that also the FBI is currently looking into domestic terrorism, at least 25 investigations and cases which have been opened. So they are calling it domestic terrorism. But let me remind you something from the Black Lives Matter movement. When in spring we had the leaked memo from the FBI that the New York Times got, we got the fact that actually FBI Deputy Director David Bowditch thinks of the Black Lives Matter movement as something close to 9/11. And I'm just wondering, why aren't there any 9/11 more metaphors evoked now? Why wouldn't Bowditch talk about 9/11 now? When on one hand you have street clashes that have gone on overboard and have become violent, but on the other hand, people are placing bombs to blow up buildings. Why aren't we talking about 9/11? Why wouldn't the FBI directors Ray and Bowditch actually show up and talk about this now? That's something that I was thinking. And I think that actually goes back into basically how are these sides going to actually coexist now? A lot of people are talking about unity, division, but I don't think there could be any unity and division if we don't address all the inequalities in the justice system and the treatment of cases and actually address what's been happening over the last 4 years. I think that would be very crucial because at the moment that someone talks about unity and let's not impeach Trump today, which probably will happen, the very next moment Trump says that the first thing he would like to do is to actually impeach Biden. And so there's this aggression on the other side, and this side, the winning side, we have to say, is somehow going to have to just lay down, lay low, pretending that nothing has happened. Um, I don't think that will be very constructive, and I think first we need to address all the crimes if we're going to have a more stable American democracy.
yeah. So where do you see this? How do you see this unfolding in the time to come? This sort of disunity that is now present and quite visible to the public at this stage. Where do you think this is going to? How is it going to unfold?
I think, as Francis said, the Republicans are so divided right now, and it'd be very interesting to see if Mitch McConnell actually makes that step. I don't think that the impeachment will reach the Senate. I don't think we'll get there in time for an actual conviction by the Senate. But it'd be so interesting, and so I think your question will be decided very much by what Republicans do in the next days if we see that a big chunk of Republicans are actually shifting more towards the center, more towards rationality, and really leave Trump behind, as they should, in my opinion, I think that would be a much better message, and in a way that will show that Republicans actually are not all supporting what happened last week. Instead, they're shifting towards more reasonable center and more towards justice.
Mhm.
Mhm. And
Can
as we
yeah,
understand, yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to mention that I think that given the divisions that have surfaced in the among Republicans right now, this is actually a very uh, critical moment when Biden coming in is in a position to aggressively move his agenda. And I mean, he and Kamala Harris have a short, pretty much at the outset, a short 2 year window to get things moving. In while they have control over both the House and the Senate, uh, and uh, and 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 with Bernie Sanders now coming in as the chairman of the Senate Budget Committee, uh, uh, the the ducks are now being lined up for a full court press in pushing his agenda at a time when the Republicans are divided. Uh, and I think this is this perfect storm that the Republicans are confronting is to Biden and Harris's advantage. So we will have to see how they how they make use of it. But this will also mean that the Justice Department, coming under the Attorney General, the new Attorney General, will have to obviously follow up um, very aggressively uh, in in confronting the right wing challenge that we're now confronted with.
Mhm. Yeah, and so just quickly before we take an ad break, in fact, it's 47 minutes past 8 p.m. Central African time. We are going to have to begin wrapping up. So a question that would then arise is, uh, how likely is a smooth transition expected to occur? How likely is this in the coming weeks? We understand that there's just 7 days remaining until Joe Biden is officially inaugurated. So this transition period, the prospects of a smooth transition, considering the events and incidents that occurred last week, Francis?
Well, I think in spite of the these developments, I mean the transition itself is going to happen. So the fact that it's not going to be derailed in spite of all that has been going on means that it will be an orderly transition. Obviously not one that has gone uncontested, but it will happen. The main problem that cropped up after the election and the uh, and and it becoming clear that Biden was the winner is that the Trump administration has been very resistant in allowing the transition to go forward. Uh, it's been a very difficult transition in terms of Biden's team interacting with Trump's outgoing team, especially in the national security sector, the Pentagon, where you had a sudden shakeup with Trump making political appointments. So there've been a number of and then Biden actually being given the go ahead from the General Service Administration for the transition to begin. So you've had those kinds of bureaucratic uh, obstacles that have been put in the way, but uh, but the transition now is underway, and there isn't going to be anything that's going to derail it, in spite of what we're looking at.
I bet our final question as we begin wrapping up for you now. Um, the impeachment that is currently underway in Washington at this moment as we speak. Um, Many would argue that there's just 7 days left until Joe Biden takes office. Is this necessary? Is the impeachment process actually necessary? Should it occur? Uh, or is it just another, sort of wasting time because, Donald Trump would eventually have to leave office within a week's time? So is this necessary to have these impeachment process, this process?
I think this is purely
Oh, it has to
symbolic.
happen.
It has to happen. This is purely symbolic. But also, we have to also consider that this would be a historic event because in the first time in history of the United States, a president would be impeached in the same mandate twice. So Trump has made history at least in one aspect. And also, I also want to think about the personal sort of aspect to the story because when you're a lawmaker, congressman, congresswoman, or a senator, and you have literally your life at stake, when you have these supporters basically trying to get in many cases trying to kill you, trying to take over your office, trying to maybe kidnap you. Basically, your life is threatened. So I understand the political implications, and I also clearly understand the personal implications because these lawmakers actually saw what the Trump mob is capable of. They were there, they felt it.
Hmm. Francis, if I do understand correctly, it does take a Senate conviction to remove Donald Trump, even after he's been impeached. What do you think is the likelihood of such a conviction?
Mhm. Well, that's kind of up in the air. It because it we don't know how quickly uh, this process is going to get underway. And Mitch McConnell has has not been very open on what he's going to do. I mean, given his given the extent of his anger at Trump for you know uh, contributing to his no longer being majority leader, he might move very fast. So it could be a quick trial. I mean, this is something that can be done. It does not have to be drawn out. On the other hand, there is the possibility that it's been recommended that the trial actually await the first 100 days after Biden has gotten in order to be able to fast track the coronavirus, uh, uh, you know, the vaccination and the economic recovery. So this is something that we're going to have to see how it unfolds. It's not clear at this point, but I think that the fact that Trump has burned his bridges with Mitch McConnell uh, is a sign that it could happen soon. It's reported that Mitch McConnell wants Trump out of the Republican Party. So we'll have to see. But one thing I do want to stress though is that there is no equivalence between between far right and far left. Absolutely no equivalence. The main threat in the U.S. has always been on the right.
All right, so I think whether we see Trump being impeached and eventually securing conviction and then being removed from office, so even if we wait for the procedure to occur as it should, where he's removed from office as he should be by the time his term in office ends, we are going to end up with a Trump who's not very happy at the end of the day, because of course he's as we've seen over the past few weeks, he really does want to cling on to his power, and of course his supporters are not going to be satisfied either. Should Joe Biden's inauguration go ahead, and I think how Joe Biden does handle this once being inaugurated is also going to be interesting to watch. But a final question before we go, and I think it's the most important question, in fact, for this evening. Why is a peaceful transition important? First, you can answer that question, Aveda, and then Francis.
It's absolutely crucial. It's absolutely crucial that nothing happens to President-elect Joe Biden on the day of the inauguration, which honestly I'm worried about. There's also talk that maybe the inauguration should be moved from the classical location into something less glamorous. That's fine, as long as Joe Biden is still fine and he's alive and he can take over. And also absolutely necessary because American democracy needs to heal. Recently, I spoke about the elasticity of American democracy. That's a very complex system that's always somehow survived. I think it's going to survive this time as well, and I just hope for the best.
All right, thank you so much for that. Francis, your final thoughts. Why is a peaceful transition important?
Well, it's important because there are major challenges, domestic and international, that the U.S. has to contend with. There's a huge domestic backlog of social and economic stabilization that has to happen, and you have to have an administration in that can de-escalate the confrontational unilateralism that the Trump administration has has been driving at the global level. So for both national and global stability, and confronting challenges such as climate change as well as the coronavirus, there has to be a peaceful transition, and which will happen.
Mhm. Yeah, and I guess the main question that remains unanswered is, will President Donald Trump actually accept his fate come 20th January 2021? Is he
Well,
going to?
he won't accept it. He will not accept it.
That
But there's nothing he can
He
do.
might as well. He might as well have to be dragged out by the Secret Service, and I can't wait to see that.
All right, and a question, in fact, a comment here from one of the Twitter viewers. So this comment here from Cracker Ninja Network says, the Republicans have completely manufactured the US Capitol attacks in order to achieve Trump impeachment and prevent 2024. Republicans no longer care about half the country. Hashtag Patriot Party now. I think this is going to be interesting and to watch how this unfolds as always, and but unfortunately that's where we'll have to leave it for this evening. But thank you so much for your time and your contribution to both of you, Francis Koenige and Aveja Geneva.
Thank
Thank you.
All right, that's where we come. That's where we're going to have to leave it for tonight, and that's how we come to the end of yet another episode of the Special Focus. Indeed, the first episode for 2021, and hopefully we can look forward to many more in-depth analysis and discussions coming your way via the airwaves of Salam Media in time to come. But for now, from myself, Zahid Jadwat, and the team Alia Laher, Ibrahim S.A. and Sadiq Joseph, have yourself a fantastic time ahead. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.